I think I didn't do anything wrong. I just pointed out how pathetic it was, that he'd only been with me. But then he said he was done, and a week later, I was holding legal papers while he smiled calmly across the table. I thought I could shame him into chasing me. Turns out he was already gone. I didn't think it was a big deal when I teased him about his past. Honestly, I thought I was being funny. Adrian was 36 and I was 32, and the only woman he had ever been with was me. I used to think that was sweet, but lately it started to feel embarrassing. My friends all joked about their husbands being players before settling down, and there I was married to a man who had nothing to compare me to. So one evening in the kitchen, I laughed and said he was lucky I had picked him, since he'd been basically invisible to women before me. He asked why I said that, and I shrugged, telling him the truth. His body count was pathetic. He just looked at me, quiet like always, which made it too easy to push further. I said he was a loser in high school, a loser in college, and that, if it weren't for me, he'd probably still be one. I thought he'd argue, maybe even try to prove me wrong. Instead, he went silent. That silence felt like victory to me at the time. At work the next day, I repeated the joke to my sister Clara. She laughed nervously, said I was mean, but I told her it was fine. Adrian needed to hear it if he ever wanted to grow up. Later, at the gym, I told Caleb the same thing. He's this guy I started chatting with on the treadmill. He's smooth, funny, and he's been around. Everyone knows it. When I joked that Adrian had only ever been with me, Caleb laughed so hard he nearly dropped his water bottle. He said a guy like that could never keep a woman like me interested forever. I pretended to be offended, but deep down I liked hearing it. I liked the way Caleb's eyes lingered, like he saw me as a woman who deserved more. That night, back home, Adrian asked why I'd been late. I said I'd stayed to stretch at the gym, which wasn't exactly a lie. He nodded, quiet again, but I could tell he didn't believe me. I told myself he had no proof, so it didn't matter. The next weekend we had dinner with my parents. Clara was there too, and she couldn't resist bringing it up. She joked in front of everyone that Adrian had only ever been with me, and that I never let him forget it. My parents laughed. My mother said at least it meant he was loyal. My father smirked and said some men bloom late. I added fuel by saying Adrian didn't bloom at all until I came along. The table chuckled, but Adrian's face went blank. He kept cutting his food carefully, like he wasn't even part of the conversation. I thought that made him look weak. I leaned back, sipping my wine, enjoying how easy it was to make him squirm. But then Clara nudged me under the table, giving me a look like I should stop. I ignored her. On the way, home, Adrian asked if I enjoyed humiliating him. I said he was being sensitive, that everyone laughed because it was funny, not serious. He asked why I needed to do it at all. I said maybe if he had more experience, I wouldn't have to make jokes to keep things interesting. He didn't respond. He just stared out the window. That silence should have warned me, but I told myself it meant I'd won. At the gym again, Caleb leaned over and asked if Adrian ever got jealous. I said Adrian was too weak for jealousy, that he didn't even know how to fight for me. Caleb laughed, said I deserved someone who could handle me. His words buzzed in my ears the rest of the day. I replayed them in my head, while Adrian sat on the couch that night, quietly reading. When he asked if I wanted to watch something together, I told him I was too tired and went to bed early. The truth was, I wanted to text Caleb instead. That little thrill I got from him felt more exciting than Adrian's steady routine. But what I didn't realize was that Adrian had started noticing. He saw how often my phone was in my hand, how I smiled at the screen. He didn't say anything, but I caught him glancing at me with an expression I couldn't place. Not anger, not sadness, something sharper. One afternoon at the gym, I didn't notice Adrian walk in while Caleb and I were laughing by the weights. Caleb had his hand on my arm, and I was leaning in too close. Adrian froze in the doorway, just for a moment, then turned away. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to act like nothing happened. Later that night, he didn't mention it. He just ate his dinner in silence. I told myself if he wasn't going to confront me, then it didn't matter. But deep down, I felt the shift. He wasn't looking at me like a man afraid to lose me anymore. He was looking at me like a man who had already made a decision. At my parents' house the next weekend, Clara pulled me aside. She said I needed to stop teasing Adrian about his past, that it wasn't funny anymore. I rolled my eyes, said she was overreacting, but the way she said it made me uneasy. She told me Adrian looked like a man carrying something heavy. I brushed her off. I told her Adrian was just boring, that he'd get over it like he always did. But on the drive home, I couldn't stop replaying the moment at the gym, the way his face hardened before he turned away. That night, as he sat on the edge of the bed tying his shoes, I asked if he was mad. He said no, just tired. I pressed him, trying to force a fight, but he didn't take the bait. He kissed Sophia and Daniel goodnight, tucked them in, and came back to bed without another word. His silence wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't surrender. It was planning. The bar night was supposed to be fun, but I turned it into a test like I always did. A few of us went out, some co-workers, a couple of friends, and Caleb, of course. I sat right next to him, even though there was room elsewhere. I leaned in close when he spoke, laughed louder than I needed to, touched his arm when he told some dumb story. I knew Adrian was watching from across the table, nursing his drink quietly like he always did. When someone made a toast to the happiest couple in the room, I clinked glasses with Caleb before Adrian even lifted his. People laughed, teasing me that maybe I had picked the wrong husband. I laughed along, tossing my hair back, acting like it was all harmless. But when I glanced at Adrian, his face was still, too still. Later, in the car, he asked why I embarrassed him. I rolled my eyes and said he needed to stop being insecure. I told him everyone was just joking, that his jealousy was unattractive. He didn't argue, didn't even raise his voice. He just said he didn't understand why I enjoyed making him look small. I told him if he had more confidence, no one would laugh in the first place. He went silent, and I thought that meant I'd won. The next weekend, we went to dinner at his parents' house. Helen had that look, the kind that made me feel like she was waiting for me to slip. Over soup, she asked directly why I was spending so much time with Caleb. The whole table went quiet. Adrian's sister looked down, Richard stared at his plate, and Helen's eyes burned into me. I said Caleb was just a friend, that people needed to stop making drama where there wasn't any. Helen didn't blink. She said no married woman should be sitting in bars giggling with another man while her husband sat ignored. Adrian didn't defend me, didn't defend himself either. He just stayed quiet, which somehow made me angrier. After dinner in the car, I exploded. I said he should have stood up for me, told his mother to mind her own business. He just said he didn't want to argue in front of the children. That was it. No fight, no passion, nothing. I hated how calm he was. It made me feel like I was shouting into a void. The following week, I bragged about it to my parents, spinning the story so I looked like the victim. I told them Helen humiliated me and Adrian did nothing. My mother said Helen had always been controlling. My father said Adrian needed to grow a backbone. Their sympathy felt like fuel, like proof that I was in the right. I told Clara too, expecting her to take my side, but she looked uncomfortable. She said maybe I shouldn't push Adrian so hard, that he didn't deserve it. I snapped back that she didn't understand marriage. At the bar again, people teased Adrian openly, asking if he was jealous of Caleb. He just sat there, quiet, while I laughed and said he wasn't man enough to be jealous. Everyone laughed with me, but Adrian's silence stretched like a shadow. He excused himself early, leaving me there to finish drinks with the others. Caleb offered to drive me home. In the car, he asked if Adrian ever tried to fight for me. I said no, he was too weak, too dull. Caleb smirked, said I deserved someone who could match my fire. The words echoed in my head all night. When I got home, Adrian was awake on the couch reading. He asked if I had a good time. I said yes, maybe more fun than he could ever give me. I wanted him to snap, to fight, but he only nodded and went to bed. The next morning, he made pancakes for the kids like nothing happened. I stood in the kitchen, furious that he could act so calm while I worked so hard to provoke him. At the next family dinner, things cracked further. Helen was colder than ever, openly calling me disrespectful when I teased Adrian about his lack of experience in front of everyone. My father jumped to my defense, saying I was just keeping things light, but Richard shook his head, disappointed. Adrian didn't say a word. He just set down his fork, excused himself, and left the table. I felt triumphant in the moment, but Clara whispered to me later that I was pushing him too far. I brushed her off, but the seed of worry lodged in me anyway. That night at home, I tried again to provoke him, asking if he was sulking because people finally knew the truth about his past. He looked at me with that same unreadable expression, then turned away. It wasn't weakness anymore. It was distance. I should have recognized it for what it was, but I told myself I still had the power. I still had Caleb. I still had my parents defending me. I still had everyone laughing at my jokes. What I didn't realize was that Adrian's silence wasn't surrender anymore. It was a choice, and choices have consequences. By the time whispers from the gym and the bar reached my workplace, the story had already taken a shape I couldn't control. A patient came in one afternoon and made a sly comment about me, always being seen with that fit guy. My coworkers overheard, and by the end of the day, I could feel their eyes on me, full of curiosity and judgment. When one of the hygienists asked outright if Adrian was okay with me hanging out so much with Caleb, I rolled my eyes and said Adrian was insecure, that he couldn't handle me having friends. I painted myself as the strong one, the independent wife stuck with a husband who couldn't keep up. They smiled politely, but I could tell they weren't convinced. That evening, when I got home, Adrian asked quietly if I'd heard what people were saying. I brushed it off, said people loved gossip. He asked if it bothered me that I was embarrassing him. I snapped back that he was the one embarrassing me, always sitting silently while others joked. I told him if he had more of a past, more experience, no one would laugh. He didn't argue, just studied me with those calm eyes, and then went upstairs to read to Sophia. That calm unnerved me. I wanted shouting, a fight, something loud to prove he cared. Instead I got silence, and it made me feel like I was yelling at a wall. Caleb was supposed to be my distraction, the one who made me feel wanted. But even he started pulling back. His texts, once quick and playful, slowed down. When I asked if we were meeting after the gym, he'd say he was busy. One night, after he ignored me for hours, I snapped and sent a long message accusing him of playing games. His reply came short. I was making things too complicated. That shook me. I had put everything on the line for the thrill he gave me, and now he was acting like I was a burden. But I didn't dare admit that out loud. Instead, I turned my frustration back on Adrian. At another family cookout, I leaned close to Caleb in front of everyone, laughing at his jokes, brushing his arm. Adrian was only a few feet away, setting food on the table. I saw him freeze in the doorway for a second before turning back. My brother-in-law nudged him, joking that he needed to watch his wife. Everyone laughed. I laughed the loudest. Adrian didn't. He just went back outside without a word. After the cookout, Helen cornered me. She said I was shameless, that I was humiliating her son in front of his family. I told her she was old-fashioned and jealous because no one paid attention to her anymore. She looked at me like I was already finished, like she could see the end before I did. Clara overheard and pulled me aside later. She whispered that I was destroying everything, that Adrian didn't deserve this. I snapped at her, told her she didn't understand what it was like to be trapped with someone dull. She walked away, shaking her head. That night at home, I tried to force Adrian into a fight. I told him Caleb made me feel alive, that maybe I'd made a mistake marrying him. He didn't flinch. He just said, if that was what I wanted, I should stop blaming him for my choices. His calmness made my skin crawl. I lashed out, said he was weak, boring, pathetic. He stood, kissed the kids goodnight, and went to bed without looking back. In the morning, he was cheerful with Sophia and Daniel, making pancakes, smiling as if nothing had happened. The children clung to him more than ever. Sophia started asking why Daddy didn't laugh when Mommy laughed. Daniel cried when I tried to take him from Adrian's arms. I told myself it was a phase, that kids always picked the parent who seemed calmer. But deep down, I knew they were sensing something I refused to admit. Adrian was the safe one, the steady one, and I was spinning out. At the dental office, the whispers became sharper. A colleague hinted she had seen Caleb with another woman at the mall. I scoffed, but my stomach twisted. That night, I texted Caleb angrily, demanding to know where he'd been. He replied hours later, saying I was imagining things. His disinterest was a slap in the face. And still, I told myself I could fix it by leaning harder on Adrian. If I made him feel small enough, maybe he would fight for me. I told him he was paranoid, that he was driving me toward other men with his lack of passion. He just said, in that quiet voice, that I would do whatever I wanted anyway. That scared me more than shouting ever could. It was the voice of a man who had stopped trying to save me. The gossip reached Clara too, and she came to me again, this time sharper. She said she couldn't keep defending me when I was making it so obvious. I told her she was betraying me. She said I was betraying myself. That stuck in my head, even as I brushed her off. Later that week, Adrian walked past me in the hallway, carrying a stack of papers. He didn't say what they were, and I didn't ask, but the way he held them close made me nervous. He had stopped questioning me, stopped trying to catch me in lies. Instead, he was just watching, calculating. The more distant he grew, the more desperate I felt. I had mocked him for years, thinking his silence was weakness, but now his silence felt like power, and I didn't know how to handle it. The night it all boiled over, the house was quiet, except for the sound of the kids upstairs brushing their teeth. Adrian sat at the table, papers spread in front of him, and I hovered nearby, pretending to scroll on my phone. I couldn't stop watching him. He was too calm, too steady. Finally, he looked up and asked if I was happy. I scoffed, said he always asked the wrong questions, that if he paid attention to me instead of his boring routines, I wouldn't need to find excitement elsewhere. He asked directly what Caleb meant to me. My heart skipped, but I forced a laugh. I told him Caleb was just a friend, that he was being paranoid again, and I accused him of trying to control me. He didn't shout, didn't throw anything, just looked at me and said Sophia had told her teacher she thought Mommy liked Caleb more than Daddy. The words knocked the air out of me. I snapped that he was twisting a child's words, but my voice cracked, and I knew he heard it. I tried to cry, to flip the script. I said he had pushed me away for years, that I only wanted to feel wanted, that if he had been more of a man, I wouldn't have looked elsewhere. I made myself sob, hoping he would soften. But he only gathered his papers into a neat stack, placed them in a folder, and said he had things to do. I demanded to know where he was going. He said he was going to take care of what needed to be taken care of. Then he left. I stood there with tears drying on my face, staring at the door. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like I wasn't in control of the script. The next few days he acted almost mechanical. He woke up early, packed the kids' lunches, drove them to school, came home and worked at his desk. He barely spoke to me, except when necessary. When I tried to bait him, calling him boring, weak, pathetic, he didn't react. When I accused him of ruining our family with his coldness, he didn't argue. He just carried on, calm and unreadable. I told my parents he was stonewalling me, that he was emotionally abusing me with his silence. My mother looked worried but didn't say much. My father muttered that Adrian needed to fight harder for me, but even they seemed less certain now, less ready to take my side. At dinner with his parents, the tension was unbearable. Helen barely looked at me, but when she did, her eyes were sharp as knives. Richard was polite but distant, asking about the children and nothing else. When I tried to crack a joke about Adrian's lack of experience, no one laughed. The silence at the table stretched until I felt my cheeks burning. Adrian simply stood, excused himself, and went outside with the kids. I sat there, abandoned in the middle of a family that no longer believed me. Caleb was pulling away too. His messages had nearly stopped. When I confronted him at the gym, asking why he was avoiding me, he said I was too much drama, that he hadn't signed up to get caught in a marriage war. His rejection hit harder than I admitted. I wanted to blame Adrian for pushing me into Caleb's arms, but Caleb was slipping away anyway, leaving me exposed. One night, desperate, I tried again to break Adrian's wall of calm. I told him through tears that I only wanted his attention, that everything I'd done was because he made me feel invisible. I said I needed more from him, and instead of comfort, he looked at me steadily and said I could tell myself whatever story I wanted, but we both knew the truth. Then he turned back to his folder of papers. His words pierced more than yelling ever could. The children started to pick up on the atmosphere. Sophia asked if Mommy and Daddy were mad at each other. I forced a smile and said no, Daddy was just tired. But she looked at me with suspicion, like she already knew. Daniel clung to Adrian constantly, refusing to let me take him at bedtime. I tried to scold him, but Adrian intervened gently, telling me to let him stay. The image of Adrian rocking our son to sleep while I stood alone in the doorway burned into me. One evening, Clara stopped by. She pulled me aside and said I had to stop before it was too late. She said Adrian wasn't broken, he was building something. I laughed in her face, told her she was being dramatic, but the way she looked at me made me feel exposed. That night, Adrian came home late with the same folder of documents under his arm. I asked where he had been. He said he'd had a meeting. I demanded to know with who. He said only that it would all be clear soon. Then he went upstairs without another word. I sat in the darkened living room, clutching my phone, staring at the empty space where he'd been. I told myself he was bluffing, that he'd never have the strength to truly leave me. But deep down, I could feel it. The silence wasn't surrender anymore. It was preparation. The morning it all became real started with a knock at the door. I was half distracted, scrolling on my phone, when the courier held out a thick envelope with my name. I signed automatically, not thinking, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. Divorce filings, custody petitions, financial statements, all neatly stamped, all bearing Adrian's name. I stood frozen in the hallway, papers trembling in my hands. Adrian came in from the kitchen carrying Daniel on his hip. I demanded to know what this was. He said calmly it was what it looked like. He had spoken to a lawyer, and everything was already in motion. His voice was so steady it terrified me. I tried to laugh, tried to dismiss it as a stunt to scare me. I said he'd never go through with it, not after everything we'd built. He didn't answer. He just set Daniel down, guided him toward his toys, and walked past me like I wasn't even there. Panic clawed at me. I accused him of ruining the children's lives, of trying to make me the villain. I told him Caleb was just a friend. That gossip had poisoned his mind. He didn't even glance at me. He said only that he had all the proof he needed. That night, I drove to my parents' house in tears. I dropped the envelope on the table, begging them to help me. My father at first said Adrian must be overreacting, that couples fight all the time, but then he flipped through the folder. Inside were photos of me and Caleb at the gym, laughing too close, at the bar, his hand on my back. Screenshots of messages that didn't say much but said enough, call logs, even a note from Sophia's teacher about what she'd said regarding me and Caleb. My father's face hardened as he turned the pages. He didn't shout, but when he handed the folder back, his silence cut deeper than any words. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. She just shook her head, disappointed, and left the room. I had never felt so exposed. Desperate, I texted Caleb, begging him to stand by me, to at least tell people it wasn't what it looked like. He replied hours later saying he wanted no part of it, that Adrian was his friend, and he wasn't going to betray him any further. When I pressed, he blocked me. Just like that, the one man I had risked everything for vanished. I was left standing alone in the wreckage. Meanwhile, Adrian seemed to glow. For years he had been the quiet one, the butt of jokes, but now people praised his dignity. His friends who once teased him rallied around him. At family gatherings, Helen embraced him proudly, glaring at me with open victory in her eyes. Even Richard, always reserved, called him strong for taking action. My parents, once my defenders, had gone cold. Beatrice muttered that I had brought this on myself. Owen refused to even discuss it. Clara, who had warned me for months, barely spoke to me at all. I tried to spin the story, telling anyone who would listen that Adrian was cold, manipulative, punishing me through the courts. But no one bought it anymore. The tide had turned. The children sensed it too. Sophia clung to him constantly, asking if she was moving with Daddy. Daniel cried whenever I tried to take him from Adrian's side. I told them Daddy was trying to separate us, but Adrian shut that down immediately. He said, gently but firmly, that he wasn't. Taking them away, he was protecting them. His calmness made him sound like the hero, and in everyone's eyes, that's what he had become. One night, Amelia looked me straight in the eye at a family dinner and said I had disqualified myself from being part of the family. My cheeks burned as everyone stared. I wanted to scream, to throw the wine glass, but Adrian's steady presence across the table silenced me. He didn't gloat. He didn't even smirk. He just sat with Sophia leaning against his arm and Daniel on his lap as if I wasn't even there. The final blow came when I saw the photo online. Adrian smiling with the children, Amelia and Richard standing proudly beside them. The caption read, "Family first." My name was nowhere, my face absent. The comments poured in, praise, support, admiration. People calling him strong, dignified, a good father. I wanted to scream at the screen, to remind them I was still their mother, but no one cared. I had made myself the villain, and now everyone agreed on the part I played. That night, the divorce papers lay on the table in front of me, heavy as stones. My hand shook as I stared at Adrian's neat signature. I had spent months mocking him, certain he was too weak to act, but now he was the one standing tall, while I was the one scrambling in the shadows. His silence had never been surrender. It had been strategy, and now the trap was closed. The courthouse was colder than I imagined, its walls too white, its benches too hard. I had dressed in my best clothes, painted on a face that I thought looked innocent and wounded, the face of a woman wronged by a cold husband. I walked in clutching my purse like it was armor. Adrian was already there, sitting with his lawyer, calm as ever, his hands folded in his lap. He didn't even glance my way. That stung more than if he had glared. When the judge began, Adrian's lawyer presented everything in order: photos, logs, statements. Each piece of evidence stacked neatly like stones forming a wall around me. The bar pictures, the gym whispers, Caleb's hand on my back, the messages, even the teacher's note about Sophia's words. Each one was like a nail hammered into the coffin of my defense. I wanted to object, to shout that it wasn't what it looked like, but my lawyer warned me with a hand on my arm. When my turn came, I tried every trick I knew. I let my voice shake. I let tears fall. I said Adrian had neglected me for years, that Caleb was just a friend, that loneliness had pushed me into needing someone to talk to. I said Adrian was cold and distant, that I had begged him for attention, and that this was his way of punishing me. I even accused him of performing for the court, pretending to be calm when in reality he was vindictive. The judge listened, but there was no sympathy in his eyes. Adrian sat steady, hands still folded, his voice even when he spoke. He said love had nothing to do with this anymore. He said he wanted stability for his children, protection for his finances, and dignity for himself. His words were sharp, not loud, but they cut through the room with more force than any shouting could. My family was behind me. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. My father stared at the floor. Clara refused to meet my gaze. On Adrian's side sat Helen, her back straight, her expression fierce, and Richard steady beside her. Sophia and Daniel were with them, small and quiet, clinging to their grandmother's hands. They looked whole without me, and that vision gutted me more than anything. When the ruling came, my ears rang. The judge awarded Adrian primary custody, with me given limited visitation. Financial protection secured for him, assets divided in his favor. The words rolled out of the judge's mouth like a list, stripping me of the life I had taken for granted. My lawyer leaned in, whispering about next steps, but I couldn't hear her. All I heard was the gavel, final and heavy. Adrian stood, thanked the court, and gathered his papers. He didn't look at me. He walked to his children, and they rushed into his arms, clinging to him like he was the only safe place in the world. I stood frozen, clutching my purse so hard my fingers hurt. Outside the courthouse, people greeted him with sympathy and respect. Friends clapped his shoulder, family hugged him, even strangers nodded at him as if he were a hero. I hovered at the edge, desperate for someone to look at me, to remind me I still mattered. No one did. I called his name once, twice, my voice cracking. He didn't even turn. He bent down, lifted Daniel into his arms, took Sophia's hand, and walked away with Helen and Richard beside him. They looked like a family united, whole, glowing. I was the shadow left behind, the finality of it pressed down on me, the papers, the judgment, the absence of his eyes on mine. I had mocked him for years, thinking his silence meant weakness. I had called him boring, pathetic, a loser with no past. I had believed I could shame him into chasing me. Instead, he walked away without a fight, not because he was weak, but because he had planned it all in silence. And when the law spoke, it wasn't me who was protected, it was him. That was the end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.